how would you approach writing a library for Vue 3? But turned out there is a delay, and all the tooling, all the methods that we would use to write a library are not available yet. Some of those existing ones you probably saw in Damian's talk, but there wasn't enough material left for me. So I had a talk with my friends who are writing libraries, and they said I shouldn't worry because actually it's just one of the many different cases that they have to deal with, because they don't only have to wait for new releases of Vue.js. They have so many different things that influence how they write a libraries, how they approach releasing new features, and I decided we will talk today a little about that. So the talk today will be called The Curious Case of a Library Maintainer. If I can ask you, how many of you have seen the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button? I'm very happy that I see the hands, at least. So Benjamin Button tried to deal with his specific case for all his life, and life taught him one thing, and those are beautiful words that he said: our life is defined by opportunities, even the ones that we miss. And with my friends, I thought that actually, when we write libraries, when we write open source projects, they are also defined by all those opportunities, even the ones we miss. So even if we don't have Vue 3 available yet, even if there are other things influencing what we write, we should still do our best. We should still care for our users, and we should try to deliver the best code possible at the moment. I don't really like to talk about myself, but let's pay attention to it a moment. My face looks a bit different because of the beard. My name is Darek Wędrychowski, but all friends know me as Gusto, because for people from outside of Poland, Wędrychowski isn't really easy to pronounce. I consider you already my friends if you came to listen to me. And if I can ask you, how many of you actually use Vue.js? That's a lot. How many of you work with Vue.js? I don't. Okay, so I consider you already my friends, so feel free to call me Gusto. I am a member of Vue.js Core Team. In the team, I'm responsible for community management. So I approach library authors, event organizers, tutorial writers. I try to connect them together. Together also with regular users. So I will be very happy if after the talk you approach me and we can have a nice conversation. I will be very grateful if you follow me on Twitter, both at Gusto.js and Vue.js, because I happen to manage this account. And finally, please join us on official Vue.js chat. We have 70,000 users there. There's also a Polish channel, although we mainly talk on English-related channels. And this is also the place where most of core contributors, event organizers, people who write tutorials, write libraries, they're also available, so you can discuss with them if you have some issues, if you have some ideas. There are also other Discord chats for separate libraries like Nux, like Quasar, like Vuetify. So this is my invitation for you. But for today's talk, we will start by going back to the past, to the year 2015. It was the year when Vue.js actually started becoming popular. It wasn't as popular as now, but the ecosystem around Vue.js wasn't really ready for production usage. It more reminded Wild West, so there was chaos and lawlessness. And library authors, people who tried to use Vue.js, were more interested in checking what is actually possible to achieve with Vue.js. Where they were trying to experiment, to see how it works, what cool can we build with that. And now Okay, I will talk about it later. So another problem was that there were no best practices because the approach was pretty new. So we had yet to learn actually how to write proper big applications, enterprise-grade applications, big production projects with Vue.js. And finally, we lack the tools to write proper libraries, to write big projects. All thought the thing that in times of Vue 1 was dominating was that people were actually satisfied with Vue.js. They were happy that they are using this framework. And now, how many of you were on Devlin's talk yesterday about Svelte? How many of you tried Svelte? It's a not really new framework, but Svelte is considered to be the next big thing in JavaScript ecosystem. I may be Vue.js Core Team member, but I also respect all the other frameworks that are coming to us. So give Svelte a chance. Who knows? Maybe in a few years you will be using it at your work too. So I called it Wild West, but actually there was also kind of Wild East, because half of the ecosystem was actually written in China. And I will be honest with you, I don't know Chinese, so the ecosystem was pretty divided. Those English language users couldn't really use libraries written in China because there was no English documentation. All the GitHub issues, even now for some of the older libraries, are always in Chinese language, so you cannot really use library if you cannot ask for help on GitHub or on help channels. And Svelte is actually in the similar situation now. Of course, they don't have the Chinese part of the ecosystem, but all those points that I mentioned before are common for all the new frameworks. So good luck, Svelte. Good luck, Rich Harris. I believe you will also make it big. And this is old Polish famous proverb, which means that first million you have to steal from somebody. So this is my tip for Rich Harris about how to approach making the ecosystem big. So why do I use it? Vue.js, when there were not many libraries, not many tools, of course, had to take them from somewhere. So Vue.js is famous for borrowing the ideas, the best ideas from ecosystem of other frameworks, from React, from Angular, and notice that we have 4 Dalton brothers. One of them should be Angular, React, Vue.js, and Svelte, but I wasn't really sure which one should be in what order. Okay, so the first person about whom I would like to talk about is Abderrahman Awad. Actually, it's pronounced Awado, but I'm not really good in Arabic language. And it's one of the authors, just like Damian, that started writing their own libraries in Vue.js 1 times, so in those Wild West times. And what's interesting about Awado is that by now he's the only African Vue.js developer who managed to write a popular library that is used across all the ecosystem. I hope there will be more of them. There was actually a second project which was managed by author from South Africa. It was Vue Meta. How many of you use Vue Meta? I do. If you use projects like Next, if you use projects like VuePress, you also use Vue Meta as a dependency. Because nowadays, Vue Meta is managed by the team of Next, by Chopin Brothers. So Awadu wrote Vivalidate. And why did he write it? Because he wanted to have a client-side validation solution for his PHP applications. He was a backend developer coming from Laravel experience, and he wasn't really good with JavaScript. But he couldn't find a good solution that would cover his use case. Back then, there were two solutions available. One of them is called Vue, which was written by Damian Dulish, and but this solution wasn't really covering his need, because you can notice we have template-based and script-based libraries. If you know Vue.js, you know that we handle code written for HTML templates differently than the JavaScript part. And the library that Awadu wanted to use was Vue Validator by Kazupon. Kazupon is one of the core team members, but okay, he wrote a few libraries that were pretty good, but he couldn't actually maintain all of them at the same time. He's just one person. So he decided to focus on the most popular of them, on Vue I18N, that right now is the official one of the core libraries in Vue.js ecosystem. So Awadu needed to write his own solution, and he called it Vue Validate. Now, let's go back to Awadu. At the beginning, it wasn't really as popular, but what happened in Vue.js ecosystem was that suddenly it started becoming more and more popular in Laravel community. Thanks to the fact that Vue.js is a progressive framework, so you can use just one instance of Vue.js object mounted on top of application written with Laravel or another server-side render, server-side framework, backend framework. So it was a good use case for Laravel, and the author of Laravel, Taylor Otwell, decided to make it officially supported in the new release of Laravel. And suddenly, Awadu noticed that at the moment Taylor Otwell started his repository on GitHub, it suddenly became more and more popular, especially among backend developers. I asked Awadu a few questions, and among them, he told me that he's a big fan of Next. We talked about Next a little, but notice the other part. For smaller projects, I just love Vue multiselect. It's probably the only component in the entire ecosystem that I never tried to build from scratch, and I just grab it from NPM. So notice that Awadu is an author of a validation library, and Damian is an author of another validation library. But Awadu is a huge fan of Damian's work. You probably saw Damian's talk about Vue multiselect today, earlier. So Vue Validate and Vue Validate are maintained in a different way. And for a long time, both libraries have separate community, because people who wanted to handle their validation in the templates were using Vue Validate, while people who, whoops, I probably have some solution to this problem. Doesn't work. Okay, it works. So with time, it turned out that both of those solutions needed significant rewrites, because Vue.js was also changing. After Vue 1, we got Vue 2, and some parts of API were drastically changed. One of the systems that were changed were the system of directives. Now directives are not as robust as they used to be in the times of Vue 1. And we validate internally in the API were dependent on the usage of directives. So we don't see here how we validate 1 looked like for Vue 1. We have the syntax of we validate 2. And recently, this year, there was a big rewrite into we validate 3.0, which brought a big breaking change. We got rid of the directives, and you can notice that we use that Vivalidate uses renderless components now. So instead of using the directive, we have a wrapper component that provides all the data we will need we will need for our validation. Validate approach is different. And notice that I told that this rewrite was in the year 2019, so in this year. But we got the ability to write renderless components, we got the ability to use scope slots like we have here much earlier. So one of another changes, one of another factors that influenced how Awadu was writing his library was that at the beginning of 2018, he suddenly got he suddenly had to go to his army service. Now, please raise your hand if you have been in obligatory army service. Not many of you. So you are happy. You are happy. So all of those factors influence how we write libraries. So internally, we validate used to use Webpack, and it also was changed. The main reason to switch to Rollup was to provide tree shaking, but also this year it got a TypeScript rewrite now in we validate Vue 3. We see here 3 names. First of all, Dave Stewart is the author of another library. It is called Vuex Spotify. It's a plugin for Vuex that allows us to get data from Vuex in a bit different way than we usually do. Brandon Surovec is another maintainer that tries to contribute to the project, while Alex Hover wrote a boilerplate for writing libraries with TypeScript, and Awadu used this boilerplate for the rewrite. So I covered a few changes that Awadu did, and they more or less fit the trends that were across all the ecosystem of Vue.js libraries. So I called the year 2017 survival of the fittest, because at the end of 2016, we got finally Vue 2 release, and not all of the library authors were even interested in rewriting their libraries. The difference between the syntax in Vue.js 1 and Vue.js 2 wasn't as big as the change in Angular, but it was still quite a hassle. And like I said, a lot of their projects were actually experiments. They didn't really think about pushing them for production use, so they thought maybe we shouldn't rewrite them. So suddenly the ecosystem of libraries got much smaller, and in this situation, the newcomers to Vue.js ecosystem got a lot of possibilities to bring their own ideas. Other than rewriting the existing libraries to Vue.js 2, the focus in this year was about providing the tools to write projects. There were a lot of projects alternative to Vue CLI, like POI, that was very popular back in the past. And there was this push to make those libraries finally production ready. So push to stability. Finally, a lot of Chinese projects got their English documentation versions. And before that, in the Vue 1 times, those libraries existing for Vue 1 weren't really properly documented. So a lot of library authors had to spend quite a bit of time providing those documentations. 2018 was the year of growing up, so the server changed into features that the users don't ask in the first place, but probably they should, because performance, because accessibility are actually very important. So 2018 was the year when Vue.js was catching up with all those ideas. Finally, 2019, I call it the year of maturity, because the project finally became properly managed. So the project management, the team management, we will talk about teams a bit later, and managing the community about frameworks were restructured. Also, a lot of libraries, especially those big libraries and tools, switched to modular architecture. If you use Next, or if you use Vue CLI, you know Vue CLI plugins, you know Next modules. If you use Vuetify, you have systems of extensions, and a lot more and more libraries also use those extensions nowadays. Finally, it was the moment when the library authors started collaborating between each other. Like I said, Dave Stewart started working with Awadu, and a lot of other library authors started reaching out to each other, because they noticed, hey, we have some of similar ideas, maybe you should work on them together. And they noticed that they use the same dependencies, and so maybe they should push those dependencies further to make them better, to provide the features that they both need to use. Next person I want to talk about is Bart Ledoux. Bart Ledoux lives in Chicago, and he's the author of Vue Style Guidist. Vue Style Guidist is a tool that allows us to write documentation for design systems. So for really big UI libraries that provide their own custom design, it's a solution different than Storybook, and that was actually the reason why Bart, I call him Elevate Bart, that Bart started working on Vue Style Guidist. The difference between Awadu and Bart was that Bart wasn't the original author of the solution. Vue Style Guidist is a Vue.js version of library that exists in React ecosystem, React Style Guidist. Previously it was called Style Guidist, then when they decided to make both versions, they renamed it. So the original author is called Rafael Escala. He comes from Peru. And at some point he decided, okay, I will focus on the React version. I will let you, I will give you full access to GitHub repository for the Vue version, because Bart had a lot of ideas how to make this library better, and especially because he needed to use it in his own company. He needed to make it he needed to provide better performance. The reason why Bart needed to use it was to actually convince his own boss that it's okay to use Vue.js in their company. They had a big design system, so they needed to document it in some way. But Vue.js they didn't know what tool they could use in Vue.js to provide a similar level of comfort for writing such documentations. That's why Bart decided to join Rafael in writing this library so that he could finally start using Vue.js at his work. Well, he succeeded. Now he's the main maintainer, and you can notice that Vue Style Guides has a lot of dependencies. It has dependencies that are not only Vue.js dependencies, but many of them comes from React. So it's a problem because if you want to, for example, customize the design of documentation, you would have to know React. For Vue.js developers, for a lot of them, it's not an option. So the next step in working on Vue Style Guides would be to get rid of all those dependencies and replacing them with our own custom Vue solutions. You can notice name of our Chinese friend, Sai Sun Yang. Once again, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. And this is an author of a similar library. It is called Vuezer. And it wasn't really popular in Europe, but at some point, Ivan tweeted about it. And a lot of people decided to check it out. Turned out, it's a great solution. So Bart felt, hey, my solution is good too. So let's try to check Vuezer. Maybe there is something I could point out, hey, my solution is better. So he started using Vuezer, and he found so many cool ideas that he could implement in his own project, that he started contributing not only to his own library, but also to Vuezer. So Bart is contributing to DocsGen API, to another library for writing documentation for Vue.js called VueDoc, which is also dependent on, which also has DocsGen API dependency. He contributes to Vuezer. He also contributes back to React version of Vue Style Guides, so that he can push features that he wants much faster. But despite of that, he didn't manage to find external contributors who could come to his project and help him on a regular basis. That's one of the things that we as Vue.js community will try to change in the upcoming 2020 year, to provide a way for library authors to seek help in the community in a better way. Walter Tomasi has a slightly similar use case. He also didn't write Buefy. How many of you use Buefy or Bulma? So Buefy, like you can see here, is a combination of Vue and Bulma components. Bulma is one of competition UI libraries to Semantic UI or to Foundation or to Bootstrap. But it comes, it's different than Bootstrap because it comes without the JavaScript part. So in Vue ecosystem, some library authors decided to write their own solution to provide those components for, how much? Oops. Yeah, well, this candy. Okay, so let's quickly go to the next slide. So we have Natalia somewhere here because I'm not really, I don't really see well with this slide. And why I wanted to spend a minute talking about Natalia, because we as Vue.js Core Team members, we are also a kind of library authors, because Vue.js, after all, is a library. And there's one specific thing about Natalia, is that originally he started contributing to Vue.js as a library, as an Angular developer. She was working for a Polish company that was using only Angular. They didn't want to use Vue.js. So what can a developer, a Vue.js developer do to find a job with Vue.js, with the what you can do to find a job with technology that you like the most? What Natalia did was she just started doing what she liked. She started writing code, she started writing articles about Vue.js, about connecting Vue.js with different external libraries such as Apollo, such as D3. She started writing content for workshops, doing those workshops, and she started speaking on conferences. If you were on Natalia's conference, you know how professional speaker she is now. So, did Natalia actually have to look for a job with Vue.js? No, because soon companies started approaching Natalia to work for them, and now Natalia works with Vue.js. She is happy with that. So this is a role model that I could recommend her way for all of us if you don't work with Vue.js yet, or if you work with another framework that you would like to. If you want to work with technology that, if you want to work with different technology, try to contribute to this technology, to the ecosystem. Companies that use this technology will be grateful for you, will try to snatch you by themselves. We don't really have much time, so thank you very much. Please join us on official Vue.js chat. I'm sorry that we didn't cover everything I wanted today. Let's give time to Tiago. You are here. Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot.
Tiago is already waiting.